Hello, this is Dean Radin, and I'm on Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Murjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hello, this is Dr. Raymond Moody, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, Cultural Creatives. I'm Bruce Lipton, and I'm here to join you with Your Superior Self.
This is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, everyone. This is Sheila Darcey, and this is Your Superior Self.
Sketch by sketch. Every time I hear that title of your book, this is a bestseller. I know it for sure. But every time I hear that sketch by sketch, I think of that old show, Step by Step, like on TGIF. That
just brought me back. I can't believe you said that. I love it.
Sketch by sketch, day by day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this book. I think it's so informative about the power of healing and the power of putting something pen to paper and actually doing it old school style, right? Writing, right? Like even writing, just writing words, either poetry or whatever it is that you prefer. I think it is a process of healing. Even writing the book, right? Even going over your past, right? Did you find healing in that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's so interesting you mentioned writing, Trey, because that's what led me to sketching. When I started sketching, I was doing it to address some of my emotional health and mental health issues. But for some reason, I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to put words to it. And I'm like, how do I express this without having to write about it? And then I remembered I used to doodle as a kid and sketch and draw, and with the help of a therapist who I finally ended up seeing. But that's really what led me to sketching, because it doesn't require words. It challenges you to express things in a visual way. And there's a lot of visual learners out there that are much more articulate about imagery than they are words. And I didn't realize it tapped into that side of myself, because I do consider myself a communicator. But when you're asked and invited to express yourself through images and through marks, I think it taps into a different part of your brain, and certainly a different part of yourself. Sure. So I think that's what's really powerful about the practice.
Mm-hmm. I think you tap into that higher self. I think you tap into that higher consciousness. I think it's just one method, one tool that someone can use to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people do meditation, right? Like some people can tap into that higher self through that and access that innate greatness that we are. And then some people need tools, right? Like drawing, sketching, is your tool, and you found great insight, right? Like, and I was asking you, I'm reading the book and I'm reading some of your insight. I'm like, holy crap. And being a psych major, I'm seeing a lot of similarities. And I wanted to ask you, like, any training in the modality of psychology, of therapy?
No, but I'm going to cut to the chase about the reason I think I'm able to share those insights is a lot of my book is around my childhood trauma. And and this is stuff I didn't know, Trey. So it's interesting. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, but I got really interested in that as well. Once I started to see and feel, I was starting to regulate my body, but I didn't know that's what was happening. I started finding this inner peace that eluded me my entire life. And so I got really interested. But the reason I feel I'm able to harness those insights is a term called hypervigilance in psychology. Because of my childhood, I was so hypervigilant. Like, I read into body language, people's voices. I talk about that in the book, and I used it to survive. And so the difference is now I use it to thrive. So when I'm sketching, I'm using the hypervigilance that I used to use with people, I use with my sketches. So I actually read into my sketches and I allow the inquiry in my heads, the thoughts, the emotions, the passing images that come through, which we all have, by the way, when we allow ourselves to actually sit in it. And that's all it is. That I feel like I'm using hypervigilance to thrive versus to survive. And I think that's really powerful.
I love that. I just love that. Being able to kind of tap into that and see what it is, right? Because like I'd never really even thought about that. Like your sketches, like people put things on paper and then you can actually see what's going on in their lives.
Yeah.
Were you like kind of like case study one when you found that out, or was it like, did you see a pattern in other people's like sketches that were kind of like, oh man, like you're showing this as well?
Yeah, well, no, that's exactly what you just said is exactly what happened. I started seeing and feeling a difference when I started sketching. I would say it was week 3 or week 4. I'm like, man, not only was I excited to do it, but I could feel a shift. And then I immediately jumped to, do people know that if you sketch every day, you could actually feel this? And because I come from the business world, I was a facilitator. I started hosting workshops, but I didn't do it till probably 3 to 6 months in, because I needed to really better understand it. So that's when I started to deconstruct, and unbeknownst to me, I was probably writing the book in my head already. I had no idea I was going to write a book. That was never the plan. But then the pandemic hit, which we'll talk about later. But that's the reality, is the book was never in the plan. But that's really I'd say the biggest part of my journey is I surrendered to all of it. I have surrendered to this process, and therefore it kind of expanded to my life. I've surrendered to everything now. And it's a very different way of living than the way I used to live. Very different.
I feel like you, like most people in business and entrepreneurship, maybe, are very A-type, aggressive, right? Like
Very
going, attacking,
academic, very
attacking.
performance oriented.
And now you're totally 180. Now you're surrender, kind of
Yeah.
allowing things to come, allowing the flow of life to flow to you.
Yeah. I mean, in the most simplistic terms, it's the difference between doing and being. Being is freaking hard. Being is hard because you have to be in the moment to be. Doing requires you to always be looking forward, because you're doing something to achieve something, or doing something to assert a certain outcome. Being is asking you to just be in the moment. And that was so hard for me. So hard. Yeah.
There's a lot of fear in that too, right? And being in the moment, because it's like, what if I'm not doing the right things?
Yeah. Well, and you and I talked a little bit earlier about the chapter of silence. For me, that was at the core. If there was one puzzle piece that came together for me, it was the awareness that I did not feel comfortable in silence. And whether that's silence of like actual noise or the chatter of life, I was always busy, very frenetic. I mean, I would say people that knew me back in the day would say, yeah, Sheila had a very hyper energy. She couldn't sit still. You know, she was 10 conversations ahead of you. Right. And that was how I was. But that I didn't even know I was that way, really. I just wasn't aware.
What do you hear in silence?
Initially,
now.
It's a great question, Trey. I would say what I hear in silence now is an invitation to accept and forgive and have compassion for myself. Because what happens when you're silent is you see, you know, this is the topic that I love having, because I was in a space recently where I was talking, and there was a gentleman that came in and said, wow, can we just cheer everything up? Like, can we just lighten it up a little bit? And I said, that's such the biggest misnomer of people doing inner work, is that we're heavy. And I said, that's the problem in terms of why I didn't do it, is I felt like if I go inward, chaos is going to go crazy and I'm going to be this heavy, you know, morose person. But that's not true. What I feel in silence is pure joy. Like I feel ecstasy, I feel pleasure, and in the process, I might be experiencing grief, despair, but the acceptance of knowing that it's okay to feel that and not have to push it away and not be afraid of it. There's something beautiful about that I never understood until I actually started doing the work, you know? And so there's just a lot. I think there's a perception of going deep requires you to be heavy in every sense of the world. You're heavy, your body's heavy, you're mentally heavy. And it's actually the opposite. I feel the lightest I've ever been.
Yeah. I feel expanded. Like when I am,
good word.
When I am, I feel like I'm part of the room. I feel like I'm a part of the, you know, I do a lot of my work in the morning when the sun is rising. So it's like, I feel a part of that. I feel like I am the sun rising. I feel like I am the sky. I feel like I am all the colors, the pink, the blue. I feel like I'm everything. And, but then I'm also here too, sitting, right? Like, so it's just being a part of that, an expanded version of myself. You talk about feeling light. Like, I have taken a hard turn on my diet, like really trying to eliminate sugar, like alcohol consumption, trying to cut back on the coffee. But I want to feel more grounded in my meditation. I want to feel more like I am interacting more with that consciousness, the higher consciousness. And it's crazy. Like I feel like I'm more tapped into my body. Like I feel like I'm more tapped into those trauma parts that are unconscious, right? Like the
Yes.
1% that I am conscious of during my day is not aware of the traumas that I experienced as a child, right?
Mm.
Or the stuff in the past that I pushed off and pushed down. When that comes up, it's usually in a situation that I'm reacting, like a slap
Yeah.
knee, jerk knee reaction, or
Yeah.
when I'm in fight or flight. It is things come out or happen. Like for instance, right? I have 3 children. My son and my daughter were fighting last night, as siblings do, and my son is like, he's just this sensitive boy, but my daughter is she's the instigator. And she can get under your skin. And we just got back from vacation. His birthday was over the weekend, and we kind of were hanging out, and they get into it, and he kicks her, right? And she's gasping for air because he got her in the stomach, and he's kind of taken back because he's not a physical kind of kid. So I hear the crying, and I immediately react, and I go in and I stomp in and I grab him by the shirt, and I'm like, then I'm conscious of it. I'm like, holy crap, this is what my dad did to me when I was and I'm like, whoa, I had to take a step back. And but that's just really, really brought home the fact that we are not conscious of everything that's going on in our lives. And there are things that are going on in our bodies that we're not conscious of. And they're to tap into, to do the sketches, to do the meditations, to learn more, get into that innate knowingness.
Yeah.
And to find out who we truly are. I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant.
No, what's really beautiful. I'm getting chills as you're talking, because when you're talking to somebody that gets it, that happens. You just get this reverberation, right? What's powerful about what you said, and one of the things I believe about the book that I constantly emphasize, is the healing is the awareness of it. There is nothing to do. And that's the power. And I'm going to go back to that message. You don't have to do anything with it. Once you were aware, like with my relationship with silence, the moment I realized it, that was the healing. It was just being aware of it. Just like the moment you grabbed your son, and something must have happened prior to that for you to know that you were being triggered, or certainly you were having a fight, flight, or freeze response, but you had to do the work before to get there, because
Sure.
I promise you would not have done that had you not done the work prior. But that's, I think, something that I want your audience to understand, when you think about your superior self. This isn't about, again, having a plan or a roadmap, or if I do this, I'm going to be better. Healing is an ing word for a reason. This is the funny part of the journey. Today's my 5-year anniversary, Trey. I've been sketching for 5 years straight, which is insane.
Wow. Amazing.
But can I tell you where I'm at right now is I thought I was in my body, but there's a very different feeling. There's a big difference between feeling your body, like being aware of where the tension is, being aware that you have a headache, a migraine, than being in your body. And what I mean by that is when you are really in your body, you realize what you said earlier, which I loved, your relationship to the environment around you, your relationship to people, because you're in it. Like there is no more shield. There's no more protection. It's all down because you're in your body. And so, yeah, it changes the dynamic of everything. You see the world differently, you show up differently, but again, there's nothing to do, just
Sure.
being aware of it. But then we can choose to sit in that awareness, or again, we can choose to push it away, which we inevitably do sometimes because we, for some reason, are overwhelmed by it. But that's why it takes daily practices to kind of help work through that.
Daily practices to kind of get that, to build new
muscle memory,
neural networks,
Exactly.
and break those patterns that are detrimental to our development. I think it's, I've for a while, I've been trying to have like out of body experiences just because of that's where all the learning is apparently, right? Like Robert Monroe and a lot of the Tom Campbell, they have these 3 book volumes of the universe and explaining what we're doing here. And it's like, this is a virtual reality. Like, how did you find that out? Where did you go? I want to get out of my body. I want to go experience the universe. But then through my meditation practices, it's like, tapping into that inner knowing. It's like, you chose to be here. Like you're here because you have experiences that you still need to learn from. You need to develop your being. And that that came through one of these experiences, you know, like that's when I read your sketches, when I read your, you know, your work, that's the message that I get. It's like, this is a case study of, you know, you, right? This is
It's a
you.
great way to put it.
This is you right here, being a human being, being
Yeah.
here on this earth, and to experience everything that it has to offer, the beauty in it, and creation. This is an example of being a creator.
Yeah, and that's a tool. You said it earlier, and I love that you said that. I've never claimed this to be a book that's going to solve your problems, or if you do this book, you're going to emotionally be healed. It is a tool. And just like any tool, if you don't use it, it does nothing, it doesn't serve you. It also may not be this tool. Like you said, it could be dancing, music. What I am an advocate for is all forms of creative expression. So some people might be poetry. I've noticed people are cooking. Cooking is a big way for them to express their emotions. So yeah, anything that allows you to tap into that, what I call that improv stage, like people that cook without a recipe, they're in essence sketching poetic, but they're doing it with food, right? And they're activating all their senses. They're putting their entire body into it. So when I talk about sketch poetic as a tool, like you said, it's one of many. And what I hope is I am advocating for all of them. So if you go to a movement class, or you go to a breathwork class, or you know, any of those are all great healing modalities, but some may not be as resonant for you as others.
Sure. So 5 years, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. It's insane.
What inspired you to start sketching? Like, was it something, a life event?
Yeah, well, my entire life was the event, but what really led me to sketch poetic was I ended up seeing a therapist for the first time. And I had a lot of stigma around therapy, like many of us do. Culturally, I had a lot of perceptions around therapy being for weak people. I didn't need therapy, you know, all of the things. But what's really interesting is I didn't go to support my mental and emotional health. I went because I was afraid of flying. I had a really debilitating fear of turbulence. And I traveled for work. And what ended up happening is it got so bad. It was a progressive thing over 10 years that I had to drink alcohol to get on the plane. So I was buzzed. And then it got to a point where the entire flight, I had to be drunk because I was anticipating the turbulence. So it wasn't even the turbulence anymore, but that was a metaphor for my life. What I see now, and what I understand now through psychology, through inner work, is whenever turbulence hit, it wasn't the turbulence I was feeling. It was all the times I felt unsafe and lack of control. So just like memories have emotions attached to it, what I didn't realize is emotions have memories attached to it. So when I'm in fear and lack of control, I was tapping into every moment in my life. I felt that. And so that's why it was overwhelming. And that's why I also have a lot of compassion for alcoholics and people with addiction, because I would never have put myself in that category. But now I realize, hell yeah, I was using alcohol as a way to cope. I might not have been an addict, but I certainly understand why people do it. Sure. So I have a lot of compassion for people that numb themselves out, because I was doing it. I was doing it for that reason. I didn't want to feel any of it. It was really freaking horrible. I hated that feeling.
Sure. I mean, let's face it. Like, you know, I've done that my entire life, where that's the nature of being a human, is like we don't want to feel pain. We don't want to feel deregulated. We want to feel positive. We want to feel great. We want to feel happiness. We want to feel all of the good stuff. We don't want to feel the bad stuff. But you have to understand that the good stuff and the bad stuff, there is no good or bad. It is just an experience, right? And it's just no one wants to admit that. They want to say, I want to be happy all the time. Where you can't be happy all the time. You can do things that entice happiness, right? Like you can do things, set up a schedule, set up a routine that influences or creates happiness. But it's just like, that's just the happiness game is just, you know.
Oh, it's such a, I feel like it's such a, oh gosh, you and I could talk about this for hours, because I was the happy person, and everyone would, outside looking in, would have thought, oh my gosh, she's so successful and she's so happy. But inside I was miserable. I was not happy. But going back to what you just said about like just the feeling of being detached to your body, it is a human experience to suffer and to feel pain. The other word that I think is important for our conversation is the word attachment. Part of the concern, I think part of the reason I didn't want to feel pain is I felt like if I felt it, it would never go away. Like it was going to be this sense of permanence. And so what I've learned through sketching and through my inner work, because by the way, when I think of sketching and art, it's a metaphor for me. And I'll love to unpack that a little bit, but I didn't pursue my art for decades, Trey, because of all this societal expectations that I had around art, that it had to be in a gallery, that people had to judge it to be, worthy. It had to be, in order for you to be an artist, you had to sell your work, right? All these perceptions I had around what an artist looked like. And that's very much how I felt about emotions. Like I thought, if I'm angry, I'm a bad person because I had judgment around that emotion. So we have all these expectations around things, and we don't necessarily ever question it. Like I never questioned my belief system really in the way that I am now. And I realized how much of the things I believed weren't even mine. They were things I heard from a teacher or from my parents or from my peers. My peers had a huge influence on me, as we know, growing up. And you realize, oh, I just took that on and I just kept it and I own that. So anyway, there's so much to this, and spirituality and faith was a whole nother aspect and layer to this. I was having a major crisis of faith. I didn't necessarily have a belief system that I think drove me and let me live my life in a purposeful way.
Like what really hit me in the book was the part where your grandmother passed, right? And the fear of flying, right? Oh, the fear of facing that death, right? Fear of flying plus, the turbulence, again, being a metaphor for the fear of actually feeling that pain of loss. Talk about that.
Wow, I can't believe it still gets me right here. The word, just hearing her. I dedicated my book to her voice because she became fairly mute at the end. Like she stopped talking. And so there's something about finding my voice through sketching that's also part of my journey. But the reason that I included that in my book, because there was a lot of shame around that when I found out that I avoided saying goodbye to her because of my fear of flying. And yes, while that isn't the only reason I didn't go, I think you're very on point that it was an unconscious reason. I didn't want to say goodbye to her. I probably didn't want to see her in that state. What it showed me is how much fear gets in the way. Like that, I truly was worried about the 15-hour flight, and LA to Australia is notorious for turbulence. It's just that path. And that's all I could think about. It's like, I could only think about that. So when I think about my grandmother, I think about that. I think about how did I get to a point in my life where the fear of turbulence overruled my heart? Because in my heart, I wanted to say goodbye. I knew that. And if I could do it all over again, I would cross fires for her, because now pain doesn't scare me the way it did now. Back then, sorry. So she's definitely a symbol for me. One of the things that, and I'm sure you can relate to this because you were talking about your childhood with your father, as you go deeper and deeper inward, you realize how much, and there's a term for it in psychology, you might know it, I forget, epigenetics, is that right? Yeah, epigenetics, yes. Right? Mm-hmm. Ancestral stuff, lots of ancestral. I feel very connected to my grandmother, even though she's no longer here, because what I'm seeing is things she never got to process. Mm-hmm. And so I feel a great, not just responsibility, but I actually feel great joy in knowing that in my lifetime, I'm able to actually process it and confront it. And whether or not I actually cross that threshold of learning and healing from it, I don't know, right? I don't know. And that's okay. I've accepted that as well. But at least I'm getting a chance to confront it. Sure. She never did.
Well, Thich Nhat Hanh said, when we heal ourselves, we heal our ancestors.
Yes. Amen to that. Amen to that.
So, yeah, we walk with our ancestors every day. You walk with your grandma. I walk with my grandparents, just being in the moment, breathing, because they're in me, right? Like all like epigenetics, Bruce Lipton, all of that, cellular memory.
Cellular memory. Yeah. That's another one. Yeah.
So yeah, that is.
You see how rich this conversation is? It's so well, and this is why sketching is so cool. Like, doodle. Okay, so here's the thing that's important about, like, related to what we just said, right? About ancestral and epigenetics. I used to doodle all the time in the office, but like I'd be on a conference call. I was always a doodler. I doodled all the time. I didn't call it sketch poetic though. You know why? I wasn't intentional about it. I certainly, and more importantly, and I put this in the book, that's step one. So getting into flow is the first step into sketch poetic. Because to your point, I didn't know how to meditate. I tried meditating, but I couldn't shut my monkey brain. But when I started sketching poetic, I didn't feel like I had to shut my monkey brain. I allowed it to actually run like a current. So I actually gave myself some compassion to say, Sheila, you can't shut it. There's no way. You're not wired to do that. So why don't you incorporate a practice that allows your emotions and thoughts to run freely without judgment? And so when I'm sketching, I'm just allowing those thoughts to process. But the reason I brought up the ancestral stuff is now when I look at my former doodles, I realize they aren't doodles, that my subconscious is at play. And my unconscious is often trying to communicate something in those images. Not every sketch is like that, Trey, but there are definitely sketches that I know if I didn't give it permission to be seen, I would never have seen it. Truly, like in every sense of the word. So it could be an image, or it could be a symbol, or it could be a resonance in the marks. I was meant to see it, but for the first time, I actually paused and allowed myself to see it. That's why sketching is so powerful, because it's trying to communicate something to you. And like going back to the hypervigilance, if you allow yourself to be curious, have some moment of inquiry and contemplation, which we don't do enough, it's great, because contemplating doesn't mean you have to have the answers. It's the knowing. I love the word knowing. Knowing isn't necessarily having the answers. It's just tapping into this truth, the source of truth that you just were born with, that we don't often tap into enough.
So most people in business don't think like that. Like when did you start coming across this literature, or when did you start coming across this knowing? Like, like it doesn't usually, I mean, for me, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like, hey, I meditate one time and guess what? I'm a guru, I'm not a guru now, but I'm just saying, like,
I'm not either.
Like, what was it? Like, who was the first author? Who was the first?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I can tell you right now. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
Michael Singer's Surrender Experiment. My girlfriend, Amy Stanton, at a dinner, we were having dinner, and it's so funny. I was getting all these profound insights sketching. I'm like, oh my God. Like, it truly hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was so excited, again, very frenetic. Guess what? This is all the stuff. And she said, Sheila, surrender to it. And she goes, you should read the book, Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And I'm like, okay. And I read the book and I got it. What she was saying to me is this: a lot is coming at you and you want to do something with it, because that's how the business world and corporate America is kind of wired me to be. And by the way, I have nothing but love for the corporate space. It's not about judgment or criticism. But the thing about corporate America is there's a value system that we really push on people, employees, because it's almost like, that term, drinking the Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way we connect with people is through our value system, but they're not our value system. It's a corporate value system. And we never give employees or people that work for companies with strong cultures to actually question whether their value system is in alignment with it. What do they ask us to do? Sign up for it. And so you sign up for it, you drink the Kool-Aid, and suddenly you embody the corporate values. And that's what I did. And I did a good job of it. Every company I ever worked for, I embodied their values, and I'm proud of it. But were they my values? No, because freedom was one of my values. And I was a workaholic and I got burnt out. How is that freedom, right? Sure. And so freedom was never a value I even thought I had until now. That was never in my value system, is freedom, and freedom in every sense of the word.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's so much to unpack with corporate America. And part of the reason I feel my story resonates is I was a businesswoman. I still am. I still have a day job. I'm the head of product and innovation at a company, but I don't define myself by it anymore. I appreciate the job.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, have you truly found freedom as far as getting out of the business world? Do you see yourself staying in the business world, or do you see yourself kind of venturing out and creating your own freedom?
Yeah, no, the answer is definitively yes. But what I love about my story is the reality is I need healthcare. I need to provide for my family. We're not at a place where I can. Is it my hope? Absolutely. But do I feel stuck? No. Do I feel limited? No. But that's the reality. It's what I've accepted. But do I see a vision for Sketch Poetic in the future that doesn't require me to work for somebody else? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But that's what's great. This is never a side hustle. Like that term lately for me, I'm like, why do people keep calling their passion a side hustle. It doesn't have to be a side hustle. It can live in parallel. Like Sketch Poetic has been in my life for 5 years while I still get a paycheck,
Sure.
right? And I don't think either one has suffered. If anything,
Yeah.
I think both have been valued for it.
Yeah. I'm a country lover. I love country songs, country music.
Best lyrics ever.
Luke Combs has a song out right now that's like, I don't know what the title is, but it talks about that, like what, in an interview someone asked him, like, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? And he said, I'd be doing this, but at a basically at a smaller scale, still working the bars, still singing, still burning CDs. That's how I feel about this. I mean, this is food for the soul. Oprah talks about filling your cup. The cup runneth over. I need these types of conversation. I read books, of the people that come on the show because I want to have a relationship with them. I want to connect with them. I want to fill my cup, and that allows me to go out into my professional life and help others evolve. I mean, you're talking about company culture. The one thing that I'm seeing that is trending is, and companies don't know really how to adapt because they're not prepared for this, is that, managers are going from what are you doing, or, watching what you do, to now, how are you doing? Like these managers aren't trained in that. They're trained in how,
such a great point.
they're trained in watching and strategizing how we get the most, being efficient, right? But we're not trained or qualified in figuring out what's going on with Sheila. Like, how do we get her to be more efficient? How do we make sure her well-being is taken care of and that she's flourishing? We don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
can I just say there's a flaw in even just that, what you just said. The flaw is the outcome. So part of the reason I struggled with art in the past is I only focused on what the outcome would be, what it looked like, or again, if somebody would like it. Sketch Poetic as asking you to enjoy the process. Yes, if you love the outcome, that's great. That's a bonus, but it's actually getting and enjoying the process. So when you talk about, and it doesn't have to be corporate America, it's just anybody that is trying to focus on mental health and wellness. If you're doing it with the sole purpose of efficiency and productivity, that's the flaw right there, because you're focusing on the outcome. You're measuring it to say Trey's well-being is only going to be measured by X. And the reality is our well-being can't be measured by anything other than it being in that moment. And so I think that's the flaw in the system. The other part and what you said is expertise. I've done a lot of Twitter spaces and Clubhouse spaces around mental health. And I actually stopped calling them mental health because I'm not a therapist. And it would be irresponsible for me to host a session where I don't have the training to do so. I have a lot of reverence for people that are clinically trained. But to your point, I don't think you have to be clinically trained to connect with people, human connection. So where I think corporate America needs to go, and I think it is slowly getting there, is getting rid of the marketing speak around mental health, right? It's not marketing. It's not a trend. The pandemic really invited us to slow the frickin' hell down, right? And if we do not learn from what we just went through for 2 years and we go back to where we were, the lesson's just going to get bigger.
Sure.
That's what I've learned. The lesson's just going to get bigger. And so let's not, it's just being in the moment, really, truly.
Let's invest in the psychological capital, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Let's explore self-efficacy. Let's explore optimism. Let's explore determinism. Like, I mean, it's just, we gotta pivot. We gotta, we really got to take a look at the well-being and flourishing. That's why positive psychology is so important to me, because that's what we're doing. We're studying what makes people flourish. Like, not all the negative, like, I'm not looking at all the diagnoses and saying, oh, well, you have this and we're going to treat you for that. It's more or less like, all right, what are your core strengths, right? Like, how do we fertilize that and grow these innate strengths of yours to flourish in a way that is going to be beneficial for you and your family and your company, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. We went on a rant, but
no, but I think it's good because we're going with the flow. There's a reason. what I love about you and I is we both have a very similar appreciation and background around business. And that's the thing that I hope resonates in the book as well, is I'm learning that part of the reason my story is being told is I do tend to be across two different worlds, right? East and West. I have a very strong masculine side as much as I do have a strong feminine side. I have a strong business side, but now I'm also an artist, right? Technology I love, but I'm also anti social media at times. Like, so there's this tension, but also this bridge that I'm building. Like I'm in the metaverse right now, the NFT space.
Yeah,
I'm
what is that?
fascinated. It's this whole crypto space. It's just this thing happening around tech. But the only reason I brought it up is the reason I'm in it is I'm fascinated and curious about what's happening in the digital world. Why are more people going digitally and not connecting physically? And so I'm meeting people where they're at. They're there. And if I want to study and understand why people are going more and more into the digital space, they're escaping something or maybe going towards something. I don't know yet, right? I have to meet them where they're at. And that's where they're at. So I'm always going into spaces that are unfamiliar, but I also feel like I have enough knowing in areas that I'm able to at least bridge. So I feel like we're bridge builders is what I was trying to allude to in our conversation, is you have that as well. I see that as we're talking, is that you have such different worlds that you've kind of spanned, that you're able to connect the dots faster than I think others can.
Sure. And it's my downfall too, because I get frustrated.
What is
People
that saying? Your greatest strengths overused is your weakness.
Sure.
If you overuse a strength, it can become your weakness.
Absolutely. It's funny because I did, the 25, 25 character strengths is Martin Seligman, who's like the father of positive psychology, and he works at UPenn. He created this survey and I took it. It's like 200 some questions. And my number one rated signature strength is like spirituality. I'm like, yeah. I mean, that doesn't, like, that's so amazing. Like it is like 25 of them or 24.
I love hearing that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And then
I don't think I meet people that have that as their number one that often.
Well, it's like spirituality and then love for learning or something like that. I have it printed out somewhere. So cool. We got to write a paper on it for psych. But what I wanted to talk about was this like little quotes in here in your book. It really hit me right like a bag of bricks, and I want to just read it real quick. You don't believe you are on the right path, so you turn up the volume until it sounds like the right path, and you can ignore the small voice saying, stop, listen, look. You know already. You don't want to hear. You don't want to take the time to travel back. They said it wouldn't be easy. You should keep going forward. Backwards is defeat, you tell yourself. You settle for a direction and a path that isn't what you said you wanted. Like that hit me like so powerful. Like that little innate voice, that is trying to tell you that you should be doing this or you should be following that because it is what you truly want to do, but you don't want to listen to that. You listen to the voices that you think is your voice. Everyone has ever told you to do something that you think is your voice in your head, but it's not. It's just a recording.
Yes.
And you turn that up and you listen to it and you go down the wrong path. And then you're 38 and you figure it out and you're like, oh, crap. I didn't listen to that small voice that said that this is not my passion.
Well, gosh, thank you, first of all, for reflecting that quote back to me. It's always such a gift when somebody does that. When I mentioned, when I saw the therapist about my fear of flying, what I didn't mention as part of that story is that was also the time where I got to the height of my career. So Trey, I had a jagged haircut. I was wearing suits, stiletto heels, like I was boss lady. And I basically got to where I thought I wanted to be. Like I was a managing director, like, I'm sure I could have gone further, but my point is I got to a point where I thought I wanted to be. And I'm like, this isn't really what I want. And I never listened to that inner voice. So that quote, that writing came from the realization, but also the reflection that not only did I ignore those voices, but I actually got to the point where I wanted to go. And I was like, oh, this isn't actually what I want. And so one of the things that I try to encourage people that come to me about just going down the healing journey is don't have an outcome in mind, because what you're not allowing for is pivots, like you said, and detours, and the very thing you're driving towards. So let's say, and this is one of the things about self-help books that I struggle with, is sometimes they paint a picture of who you're going to be once you've done this work, right? I don't do that because this is a tool. I have no idea what Trey is going. And here's the most beautiful truth. It may be the instance of you that should have existed 40 years ago, right? It's not about being a better version of yourself. It's a lot of unpacking and deconditioning and shedding of the skin. That's what it's been for me. It's, if anything, it's just coming home, right? But yeah, but I think that's the part that was so healing for me, is I just kept on looking at the world as a path forward, and here's the direction I'm going, and this is what it's going to look like. And this is the thing about visionary people, or people that are very goal focused, is this is why I think sketch by sketch is good for performers and A-type people, is we visualize things to make things happen, right? People call it manifesting, whatever you want to call it. We just have a goal and we can visualize it. That's the same thing you're doing with sketching. You're visualizing but the only difference is you're being in the moment. You're not focusing on where it's taking you. You're focusing on what's happening now. So there's power in that. It's powerful to just every day look at the now, learn from it, and that's all you got to do. Versus, if I do this work now, a month from now, I'm going to have a regulated body. If I do this work now, I'm not going to hold my breath anymore, right? I'm not saying any of that. That's what happened to me, yes, but that might not be where you go. You just got to make room for the path. Yeah.
Who said that? Was it the Buddha? Was it Gandhi? Somebody said something about becoming the path, right? Like to walk the path, you have to become the path, or something like that. Like that is the purpose, is to become it, to be it, it's not the finish line, like no, there
isn't.
As much as I want to like look down the road of the future Trey and say that this is where I'll be, or what I'll look like, it's not as fun as looking down the path and seeing all the experiences that lead up to it, and there is frustration, there is fear, right? I mean, everyone I think can resonate with that, because it's like, will it happen? Will these things, will I be able to pivot? Will I be able to sketch for 5 years and then write a book with Hay House?
But if I had that in mind, I probably wouldn't have, because it's so daunting to think about sketching every day for 5 years. That's my point. I didn't think about any of that. There's a word in my book that shows up a lot, because I did the whole I remember when I was writing my manuscript, I noticed I kept on using the word discomfort. And I'm like that. There's a reason I'm using that word, is for me, I never felt comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And discomfort can show up in many different ways. And going back to walking the path and being in the moment, I'm always uncomfortable. I realize how often I'm uncomfortable, whether it's social anxiety or uncomfortable with life or whatever, all the different stresses that come. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. But before, I would avoid that feeling. Now I know that it just happens, and I just allow myself to sit in the feeling. So what sketching has taught me is just allowing me to be able to be in it, and not, again, going back, not being attached to any of it, because everything is transient, right? I just didn't realize how fearful I was of attachment to things. And I didn't realize how attached I was to that fear, especially when it's fear, especially when it's emotions that you have avoided all your life. Like for me, I don't know, Trey, what your emotions that you avoided, but for me, I avoided anger. I felt it. This is the other thing about emotions that I didn't realize. Emotions come in my mind 3 ways. There's the feeling of it, there's the expressing of it, and then there's finding meaning in it. I was really good at feeling certain emotions, but terrible at expressing. So anger, I felt anger, I just never showed it. Sadness, really good at expressing sadness, but I noticed I was really never sad for me. And you used the word self earlier, and I love that your podcast is called Your Superior Self. The biggest aha that I had around emotions, because my book is all about emotions. I felt all kinds of emotions, but I didn't feel them for me that often. Compassion being one, forgiveness being another, shame. I could tell you all the times I felt sad for other people. And like I said, angry or compassionate, but when it came to me, I just didn't give myself that feeling. And anger was one of them. Like I never felt angry for me. Like I never allowed myself the grace to feel angry for what happened to me, because I didn't think it was necessary. Right. And so that's all I'm saying. Sadness, and different people have different versions of that emotion, whatever that emotion is for you. But we're really good at feeling for other people, and we watch movies and we go through all the emotions, like horror films and romantic movies and sad films. But that's us expressing emotions based on images, based on what we're seeing. But if you were to reflect back on your childhood and watch the movie of your life, that's kind of what it feels like. It's like, oh God, that 4-year-old girl went through that.
Well, how does that change you as a parent?
Oh, Trey, man, it has changed me big time. I think the fortunate thing with my daughter is when she was in my belly, I already knew she wasn't mine. Like I didn't feel ownership of her. I knew she came into my life for a reason. So I will say that before Sketch Poetic even came into my life. But the difference is, I'm going to use the art metaphor. I feel like I'm making marks with her, but her marks are her own. So let's say her and I are sketching on the same page. Her marks will always be her marks, and my marks will always be mine, but it's the way they come together. So the way I look at her is a work of art. Like I genuinely do think of her as a sketch in action. And some days I can see her like scribbling, and some days she goes inward and it's just a blank page with some dots. But I don't try to make it better. I think that's the easiest way to put it. Like I'm not trying to make the artwork or find balance in it. Like I used to, like I could look at a piece of art and try to make it look good, right? I don't do that anymore. That's how it's made me a better parent. Because the way I've accepted myself as an artist is the way I've accepted her as a singular human being having her own soul journey. I don't feel like I have to, I'll do the best I can as a parent, but I don't feel ownership of her journey at all.
So beautifully said. I love that. Because I feel the same way. I mean, as a child, I think my inability to express love, right? Like, not that I didn't have it, just my inability to express it.
Right.
Maybe it's because I'm a male. Maybe it's because of where the area that I grew up in, but it was a weakness to display any type of really love, or, we just didn't,
Vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because it seems vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. And then now it's like any chance that I get for my kids, I want to express love to them. I mean, that's the most powerful thing in the world is love. And even for people, just period, is being able to express my love for everyone, even the people that really just fire me up, but it's like, they're here for a reason. They're here in my experience for a reason. And to understand that, they're going through things just as much as I am, and they're probably expressing that version of themselves because of their programming and their belief systems. So it's like, you got to have, compassion for that, which ultimately is a form of love. And my empathy, I can empathize with the best of them, but it was just generating that love and displaying that and showing you that was my weakness. And I think through this process, through this journey, one thing that is definitely done for me is it's opened my heart. I had a thick casing over that bad boy because I didn't want to, didn't want to feel hurt, loss of love.
Your children are so lucky. I hope they listen to this podcast.
You hear that?
Hey, listen, my daughter is 14 and I know I'm not the cool mom anymore, but I listen. I think here's the thing. Love, it's so cliche, but you watch documentaries of people that have had, that are in the prison systems or that are in, homeless. A lot of the stories have to do with a lack of love. It's plain and simple. It actually has been proven time and time again in many different ways. Addiction. I had love. I did have love in my life, and that has sustained me. Did I have a hard childhood and have I had hard traumatic experiences? Absolutely. But the self-love is the hard part too. And so I think the conversation that we're having that's really important is, yes, we can love our children, but if we're not mirroring that self-love, they see right through that, man. Kids, whew, they're like your truth sayers.
Absolutely.
They feel it before they see it. And that's the thing about emotions, what I love. Kids, we're all born as emotional beings, and then we just condition ourselves out of it through, it's like, don't feel, don't trust your intuition. That's all intuition is listening to your body and listening and feeling your body, because your body is truly the first, people say it's up here, but your body is actually the vessel that's telling you what is going on. It's truly the vessel in which it's communicating. And yeah, that's all I'm saying is self-love is equally as important as giving love.
I'm going to give you some love now. This has been an amazing chat, and your book is amazing as well. I love it. The art in it is just one of a kind, and it's so powerful, and that I can't thank you enough for the work that you do.
Thank you. I hope it's a bestseller. I do. I hope I wanted to have a ripple effect in the world.
Where can people find you? Where can they find out more about you and contact or get in touch if they want to?
The good news is it's really easy. Sketch Poetic is my pseudonym, Sketch Poetic, one word. And you can find me on Instagram, on my website. And that's really where the community is. So if you looked and searched hashtag Sketch Poetic, you'll see people all around the world that have been sketching with me, either following my journey or through the workshops that I've been hosting on Zoom or in person. So there's huge community behind this that's already a part of it as well. And some of them are in the book.
I love it. Sheila, I can't thank you enough for joining the show. This has been definitely one of the greats.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.